In this video, we're going to be doing a mock Titans offseason, trying to rebuild this team, make it somewhat competitive for next year. I'll be going through what I would do as GM, all the cuts, re-signings, free agency, draft, trying to keep that perfect balance between a somewhat ideal scenario, but not just gaming the system. Starting out, the Titans have $72.3 million in cap space, at or near the top of the league, depending on what source you look at. And we're going to add to that cap space by making two cuts. The first one is a no-brainer. We're going to cut Andre Dillard. As far as the timeline, this is actually going to happen post June 1st. If you cut him after that date, you can save $6.5 million in cap space as opposed to $3 million if you cut him before June 1st. So even though it was a disaster signing, that's what you get for going bargain shopping for tackles. It ultimately doesn't have that much of a long-term negative impact. And then I'm also going to save $2.9 million by cutting Daniel Brunskill. He's a fine player, but as we'll get into when we look at the projected depth chart, I'm actually comfortable with starting Dylan Radins at right guard next year. I thought he played very well down the stretch and definitely someone you can survive with being your worst offensive lineman. And the goal for this offseason is to improve the other spot, so he is the worst offensive lineman on the team. There's some other moves you could potentially make to add some cap space. You don't gain anything by cutting Caleb Farley. You would gain $4 million if you were able to trade him, but I have a hard time imagining a team trading for Caleb Farley at this point. And then if you needed to, you could restructure Harold Landry or Jeffrey Simmons. I end up using all the cap space in free agency, but didn't end up needing to dip into the restructuring. That is an option if they decided they wanted to go crazy in free agency, but I think it's smart to try to build as competitive of a roster as possible while maintaining that long-term flexibility. Another cut you could make is Malik Willis, save about $1 million. If they feel like there's a better backup option at a similar price, I'm fine with that. I don't have a major problem with Malik as the backup, and so that's going to do it for the roster cuts. Moving on to the Titans free agents. Ryan Tannehill's a free agent. Obviously, we're letting him walk. By the way, for most of these free agent contracts, I'm going off of Brad Spielberger's projections on PFF. He's crazy accurate with his contract projections, so I'm just going to go off of what he thinks. And he's got Derrick Henry making $10 million a year. The Titans do need another running back to pair with Tyjae Spears, but I'm not really interested in spending $10 million on a running back, even though he is still a good player. So we're also going to let Derrick Henry walk. Danico Autry, I am going to re-sign to a one-year deal, $7.25 million. Probably the last season I want him on the roster, but he's shown that he still has some pass rushing juice. Azeez Al-Shaair, I would be okay with bringing him back, but Brad has him projected to make almost $7 million a year, which is definitely too rich for me. Aaron Brewer, I'd be cool with re-signing him if the NFL banned the forward pass, but you can't be that much of a liability, so we're going to let him walk. I'm going to re-sign Sean Murphy-Bunting, 1 year, $4 million. Chris Hubbard, I'm going to bring back as a swing tackle for 1.5. I'm re-signing the long snapper Morgan Cox, and then Kayvon Wallace, I think, has played his way into competing for a starting role next year. Elijah Molden really struggled at safety down the stretch. He had 2 coverage busts in quarters that resulted in touchdowns. So going into the season, Kayvon Wallace is going to be my safety 2 opposite of Amani Hooker, and then Elijah Molden is going to be the 3rd safety. It isn't a great safety room, but it's not like the Titans can really afford to prioritize building through that position. And then everyone else I'm going to let walk for now. I'm not doing a full 53-man roster projection, so a few of these guys you could bring back for cheap to fill out the bottom of the roster. But with that, I think we're ready to move on to free agency. And I'm just going to go in descending order of the value of the contract. So for starters, the Titans desperately need a tackle. Tyron Smith is the best tackle on the market. I would be surprised if he signed anywhere other than Dallas. So realistically, he's going to be off my board. And I'm going to sign Michael Onwenu from the Patriots to play right tackle. 4 years, $58 million total, about $33 million guaranteed. Now with all of these contracts, especially the bigger ones, usually when they get signed, they're going to be backloaded. So if it's a 4-year deal, year 3 and year 4 are going to have bigger cap hits than the first couple years. I actually didn't end up needing to do that at all, but it's an option. But Onwenu has experience at right tackle and right guard. He's going to allow us to focus on left tackle in the draft, and fingers crossed the Titans could have a starting caliber tackle duo heading into next season. And then my second big free agency signing is going to be cornerback L'Jarius Sneed from Kansas City. We're giving him a 3-year, $52.5 million deal. He was on my second team All-Pro roster, definitely the best season of his career, but he's been good ever since he came into the league. This year, he really emerged as a shutdown #1 corner. And with that, you've got Roger McCreary in the slot, Sean Murphy-Bunting as kind of a placeholder cornerback 2. Hopefully Hopefully you can draft someone more developmental and they can win that job eventually, but I feel pretty good about that cornerback trio. I'm expecting Jalen Johnson to probably get franchise tagged by the Bears, so I wasn't really considering him. Similar deal with receiver. The top two options are T. Higgins and Michael Pittman. Again, I'm going to operate under the assumption that they will be back with the Bengals and Colts respectively next year, whether that's on the franchise tag or a new deal. If they end up being available, I'd be cool with either of those signings, but for now, we're going to have to go bargain hunting a little bit. I like Darnell Mooney. I like the deep threat element of Marquise Brown, but I'm actually going to go with Curtis Samuel and give him a 2-year, $18 million deal. He's got deep speed. He's an underrated route runner. He can be productive in more of a gadget role, and ideally he'll be the Titans wide receiver 3, assuming there isn't any major drop off from DeAndre Hopkins. I'm also going to sign a center, Tyler Biadasz from Dallas. I thought he had a really good year in 2023. He'll be, I think, a clear upgrade to Aaron Brewer. We're going to sign Willie Gay from the Chiefs, 1 year, $3.75 million. He's coming off a down year. That's why he's not projected to make as much, but I think still a bargain compared to what we would have to pay Azeez Al-Shaair, and Willie Gay's always been one of my favorite players. They need a nose tackle to replace Tier Tart, so I'm going to sign Raekwon Davis, 2 years, $7.5 million. I'm giving Zach Moss pretty much an identical contract to be the RB2. This move I could definitely see happening in real life. It's crazy how often teams will sign players in free agency that went off against them the previous season, but Tyjae Spears is still going to be the lead back. And then I'm giving 1 year, $1 million to tight end Jack Stoll out of Philadelphia. He'll be the third blocking tight end that everyone hates. So we come out of that with $6.72 million in cap space, which should be enough to sign all of the draft picks. Like I said, most of these contracts can be backloaded if you need more money to fill out the rest of the roster. And we're heading into the draft with really just one pressing need, which is left tackle. You never want to go into the draft saying you have to pick one position, but the Titans need a left tackle with this first pick. For the draft, I'm not going to use a mock draft simulator or anything. I'm just going to be going off the consensus board and trying my best to be realistic based on where I think these guys are going to go. For the most part, I'm not going to take anyone like 10 spots later than their consensus ranking, but I am trying to create sort of my ideal offseason. So Joe Alt is going to fall to pick number 7, and the Titans are getting their left tackle of the future. He's comfortably my number 1 offensive tackle in this class. Olu Fashanu out of Penn State is a top 10 caliber prospect, but I thought his tape took a step back this season. He has a lot more work to do as far as hand usage, and he's nowhere near the run blocker that Joe Alt is. I have scouting reports on both of these players up on the channel if you want to go check those out, but I feel very confident that Joe Alt will at least be a quality left tackle. Just to play out some different scenarios, if Joe Alt's off the board, I think you take Olu Fashanu here. If both of them are off the board, then you have to make a really tough decision. Even though left tackle is such a pressing need, if Alt and Fashanu are off the board, that probably means that Malik Neighbors fell to 7, and in that case, I'd rather take Neighbors than reach on someone like JC Latham or Marius Mims. If somebody wants to trade up from like 14 or 15, that would be my first choice. You could regain some draft capital, take Mims or Latham in the mid-first round, but if there are no trade partners, I would take Malik Neighbors, and then you've got to try to hit on a second-round tackle, which is a lot easier said than done. I don't think Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma lasts to the second round, but if he's there, he would be my first choice. If not, you're looking at players like Jordan Morgan out of Arizona, Kingsley Suamata out of BYU. But in this world, Joe Alt's available, so we take him at 7. The next pick's at 38. In my most recent mock draft, I had them trading back with the Eagles and gaining a 3rd round pick. That's definitely on the table, but if A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver out of Texas, is available, I'm taking him with no second thoughts. I have a 1st round grade on him that doesn't seem to be the consensus around the league, but I think he has true wide receiver 1 potential, and the other receivers you're looking at in this range have a lot more question marks to me. Guys like Troy Franklin out of Oregon, Xavier Legette out of South Carolina, I feel a lot less confident in them. So these top 2 picks, this is the dream S tier, best case scenario for me. The 3rd pick is at 96. This is where I am going to trade back and try to recoup some draft capital. We're going to send 106 to the Packers for 125 and 135. That lines up pretty evenly on the trade value chart and gives me an excuse to talk about more prospects. Regardless of where it happens, I think they should really be trying to trade back at some point in this draft, and unless there's some mind-blowing fall, I wouldn't even consider trading up. So at 125, I'm gonna go with edge rusher Austin Booker out of Kansas. I just got done watching this guy. He's 184 on the consensus board now. I could see him sneaking into the second round. His tape against Texas is one of the better individual performances that I've seen in this class. He's got super long arms, really quick with his hands. This is his first year getting any playing time. He had 23 snaps before the season, transfer from Minnesota, but his potential is through the roof. He is pretty skinny, 6'6", 245 pounds. So he's gonna start out as the fourth edge rusher ahead of Rashad Weaver, behind Danico Autry, and be more of a rotational guy in year one, and then year two, let Danico Autry walk. Austin Booker can step in and hopefully be productive. At 135, I'm going with cornerback Nehemiah Pritchett out of Auburn. He was one of the only corners this year that was able to stick with Malik Neighbors with any sort of consistency. The one thing I kind of worry about with him is run defense. He is pretty skinny, 184 pounds, but in terms of fluidity and movement skills, he would be the best cornerback on this roster, including L'Jarius Sneed. And then at 144, I'm actually going to double up at cornerback, pander to Vols fans, and take Kamal Hadden out of Tennessee. His 2023 season was cut short due to injury, but in the 7 games that he played, his tape was pretty much flawless. I have a mid-4th round grade on him right now. There's sometimes watching him that I question his deep speed, but a lot of those reps, he's in a side turn and cover 3 or something. If we get some confirmation on his speed at the combine, I'm definitely moving him up to a 3rd round grade. Really good run defender, great ball skills, disruptive at the catch point, and he's got the size that Nehemiah Pritchett is kind of lacking in. At 184, I'm going with Garrett Greenfield, left tackle out of South Dakota State. They're going to have probably 3 to 5 players get drafted this year. I think he's clearly the best out of that group. He's 6'7" with really long arms, but he's so balanced and light on his feet. He doesn't get tested a whole lot in pass pro at that level of competition, but I was impressed with his hand usage. Run blocking is the main thing he needs to work on, but in the 6th round, I think that's great value for some tackle depth. So we doubled up at left tackle and corner. At 228, I'm going to double up at receiver and take Isaiah Williams out of Illinois. He's a day one ready slot receiver, crisp route runner, doesn't have a super high ceiling or anything, but he can separate, he can produce after the catch, and another slot receiver that I can fall in love with that'll be inactive because he doesn't return punts. All right, other positions that I think you could consider in the draft. Linebacker's definitely a position of need, but I was impressed with Otis Reese's tape from the last 2 weeks, and this is a historically weak linebacker class. Like, it is so bad. I like 2 or 3 guys in the top 150, but no one else that I'm willing to spend any real draft capital on. I think safety could be an option on day 3, and you could also go with a guard, but I prefer Garrett Greenfield to any of the guards that were in that range. And then looking at the depth chart to wrap things up, we've got Will Levis and Malik Willis as our quarterbacks, Tyjae Spears and Zach Moss at running back. At receiver, we have A.D. Mitchell, DeAndre Hopkins, Curtis Samuel, Traylon Burks, Isaiah Williams, and Kyle Phillips. Tight ends, Chigakonkwo, Josh Wiley, and Jack Stoll. That's honestly not a terrible group of weapons. There's a lot of unknown with A.D. Mitchell. Can't really have much confidence in Traylon Burks at this point, but I feel a lot better that Will Levis has some people to throw the ball to. The starting O-line left to right is going to be Joe Alt, Peter Skoronski, Tyler Biadesh, Dylan Radens, and Michael Nwenu. They would definitely sign a backup guard in this situation, and I am moving Jalen Duncan inside. On defense, we're going with Harold Landry, Arden Key, Danico Autry, and Austin Booker on the edge. Rashad Weaver might be in danger of getting cut. He's pretty much completely ineffective. Linebacker is pretty weak with Willie Gay and Otis Reese, but there is some upside there. Cornerback, I feel much better about. L'Jarius Sneed, true shutdown CB1. Roger McCreary was probably their most improved player last season, maybe their only improved player. And then Sean Murphy Bunting would probably be the day 1 starter at CB2, but you're hoping that Nehemiah Pritchett or Kamal Hadden could win that job. Trey Avery, you don't want to see on the field again unless they're tanking for draft position. And then at safety, it's Amani Hooker, Kayvon Wallace, and Elijah Molden. So yeah, that's going to do it for my mock Titans offseason. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments.